Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Today we're going to be discussing the 5th round of the Telenet Superprestige, which took place in Mol around the Zilvermeer Recreational Lake. And with me to do that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
3 days of racing in a row, a tough ask for the riders, maybe not as much for us, but certainly a few talking points from today's races. Let's start with the men's race. Today we did not see a repeat of yesterday. Van der Poel had mercy for his competitors. He deliberately waited with attacking, is what he said in his post-race interview, but still there was no stopping him. About 23 minutes into the race, he took the lead for the first time, shot a first missile through the sand. Sweeck was able to follow. Van der Poel briefly opened the gap over Sweeck, but Sweeck managed to come back with a spectacular passage through the sand by pit 2. However, even for Sweeck, he thought, if I go down, let me go down as a hero, but eventually he also had to let go of the wheel of the world champion. Van der Poel went on to take victory. Sweeck comfortably took second, and kind of out of sight of the cameras, Van Toerenhout managed to distance himself from a bigger group fighting for the third place on the podium. Different strategy here, Issam, by Van der Poel today. Not really surprising that he takes the win here, right? I mean, there was a lot of anticipation, high ticket sales, because this would have been the first battle with Van Aert. However, Van Aert isn't here. He has been ill a bit and will likely race in Loenhout, is what the media is reporting now. But even with Van Aert here, we know that and have covered that there's two different approaches here. Van der Poel has eyes on that 7th world title. He wants that. Van Aert doesn't, and you see that is also in his absence a continuation, right? He is just by far the strongest cyclocross rider, and we're going to see much more of this in the races he does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it is no surprise for anyone, to be honest, the way, he won again. He chose his moment a little bit more careful than he did yesterday. Took his time, and I think that, despite that you could see today that he was a little rusty through the sand, and he had his moments where he had to dismount a little bit earlier, I think he still, it was very clear that the difference in power between him and the rest is just insane. And just the shots that we also got on the broadcast, the side view when he was, alongside the lake, pulling like a madman. It brought me some memories from Paris-Roubaix, and he's that guy at the moment. He's just unbeatable. There is not much you can do to beat Van der Poel, and I have to say I really commend Sweeck for making it interesting today. He got a course that suits him well. He got the sand to play with, and he did what he could. I mean, honestly, he absolutely gave it his all. And then at a certain point, you just saw he had to, change gears a little bit, kind of understand the situation and realize that there was not really much he could do. He didn't really have much left to follow Van der Poel, and that was all that was there in the race. I think that for Sweeck, second was maybe because of the way he followed Van der Poel, and the rest was just not really able to follow them. And then Sweeck, probably with his experience through the sand, was able to maintain at least somewhat the gap that he had on his competitors behind, and managed to finish second. And I think, if it wasn't for Sweeck, it was probably an even more boring race. So I'm happy that he did what he could.
It was fantastic to watch him. I mean, you mentioned the side pans that we got from Van der Poel, and like the side pan across a lake, it's like iconic in cyclocross. There's many courses like this. I remember that Hofstade kind of used to be a unique course, but now we have this course. We had Heerde this year. Where else do we go? We go to Lille, and I'm probably forgetting at least one or two other races that have these sections. Sint-Niklaas, for instance. But they're still fantastic. But also, just to see Sweeck riding through the sand, that for me was even more fabulous, because especially when he was under such pressure by Van der Poel, nailing that section around pit 2 when it wasn't as easy as it was before. Like, it got easier throughout the race because there was a rut forming. But he did it when it was still more impressive to ride through it. And just the way that he floats above his saddle, how light he is on the bike, how he lets his front wheel search the path that he's going to be taking, that's just fabulous to watch. And as you said, the course here was great for him because the sand played a major role in this course. Probably after Kokzijde, this is the course where sand has the biggest role. And yeah, he did well. Did he get second place because of trying to follow Van der Poel? I guess you could argue that, but I think he would also just have dropped them at some point as well. It was a good outing by him today, and also a bit what he needed, because the two races he did yesterday and the day before were not his best results of the season, but it's good. And I find it funny because if you look at the Belgian betting sites, which I don't really bet, but I just took a look there to see the odds of Van der Poel. He's so low that they're even opening bets now winner without Mathieu van der Poel. So I thought that was quite interesting to see. I don't recall seeing that before. But maybe something for the road. Winner without Tadej Pogacar. Probably trying to find more ways to make money before they can't spend it on sport advertising anymore, because that's going to be banned in just over a week when we'll see the Poel 1000 Clementines. Speaking about that team, Van Toerenhout was third today, Issam. That was kind of out of the sights of the camera. We didn't really see what happened, but it was a good outing by him. He also kind of needed it, because you definitely want to have some momentum going into Christmas and then into Gavre. That's a really good course for Van Toerenhout. Let's see if he can be the one trying to follow Van der Poel the longest there. But both he and Iserbyt didn't have a good start. Iserbyt, he missed his pedal and then just stamped on the ground, nearly went sideways. Could have been quite close to the Ryan Kamp crash in Ruddervoorde this year. Luckily it wasn't. Iserbyt from there on was kind of just a rider in the race. We never really saw him anymore. And Van Toerenhout, he didn't have that reason for a bad start, but he was like 18th or something and then moved through the field quite well. But it was a bit of a shame that we didn't see too much from that battle, because it was quite close.
Yeah, it definitely was close. I mean, from the broadcast that we got from Van Toerenhout, it definitely looked like he was not comfortable in a position, at least, to be the best of the rest behind Sweeck and Van der Poel, obviously. But it was, yeah, eventually he was able to pull it off. I think, Van Toerenhout is definitely someone that can run quite well, and I think that from that group that he was in, there were not a lot of riders that were able to go through the sand for the entirety, that like the last sand section that you got on the course. So I feel that probably could have played a role, and I think that Van Toerenhout as well is, he's maybe someone that with the races that already have happened, twice already they had to race, and that's now the third consecutive race for quite a few of the riders that were with him battling for that podium spot. Maybe the fatigue was kicking in a little bit, and he got the better of them. And I have to say that came, I wouldn't say somewhat out of nowhere, but he's someone that has been struggling a little bit. So I think for him, definitely a good way to end this 3 races that we got right now, and he can go into the Christmas period and the Christmas days, and then obviously what follows next, relax a little bit and get going again and try to find something positive out of this race and, keep that momentum going.
So yesterday, Issam, you said you thought Van Toerenhout might have already passed his peak. He was very good in the beginning of December. He did a lot of training in Spain. Do you reconsider that based on today's result?
No, not really. I feel that I think that the fatigue played a bigger role today than the form as well. I think that just a lot of riders were more on the base that they kind of have and were able to make use of that. I feel that Van Toerenhout, we will get a confirmation for sure in the next couple of races that he will do, but it looks like he is somewhat at the end of a peak in terms of form, and that doesn't mean that he's just now going to be not being able to score some decent results, but I think it's just going to be a lot more difficult than it was a couple of weekends ago, and that is how I kind of vision it at the moment for him in the next couple of races, that I feel that he is, despite the third place today, it's not over for him in terms of struggling and trying to have good results. But you're obviously going to have races in which the participation will be, the field will be a little thinner, and we will have less riders that can really fight for a podium, and that will obviously help him out in a way as well. So it's double for me, but I still kind of stand on that notion that he at the moment is definitely, looks like his form is somewhat at the end of his peak and going towards a lower end of a curve.
I don't agree with that, because I think Van Toerenhout will do a fine job this Christmas period. In Gavre, he's going to get a course that suits him well, and I think in Muddy Besançon, he should also be able to perform. Yes, this weekend was a bit underwhelming compared to what he's done before. Yes, it's harder to win now. The playing field is more level because others also went to Spain, whereas Van Toerenhout did a lot of training in Spain before. But still, he revived his hopes of the Superprestige overall today. He gains 2 points on Van der Putten and 3 on Van der Haar. He is now just 3 points behind Van der Putten and 2 behind Van der Haar. We're getting some good courses for him still. Diegem is probably the hardest, but Gullegem in the mud, it usually is muddy there, should be good for him. And then in Middelkerke, that's also a course that he likes. So I think we can see Van Toerenhout do well. He certainly proved it today after that bad start to recover like that. Maybe this season Van Toerenhout doesn't win any championships. Of course, the Belgian championships still need to take place. But he is in a realistic position to win 2 classifications. He leads the World Cup by 22 points over Toon Aerts. And as said, in the Superprestige, he's completely in the mix. So I definitely think that we can see a lot more from Van Toerenhout this Christmas period. Let's look at the entire top 10 then, because behind Van der Poel, Sweeck and Van Toerenhout we found Viseuren ahead of Van der Putten and Van der Haar. 7th place went to Kuhn ahead of Oorts, Daan Soete was 9th and Lander Looks completed the top 10. Issam, I think the thing we should still talk about here is probably the battle between Van der Putten and Van der Haar. What do you think for the overall of the Superprestige? As said, Van der Putten now holds a 1 point lead over Van der Haar. I gave my take. What do you think?
It's difficult to say, because Van der Putten is someone that normally will always be somewhat up there, but he obviously is going to race a lot in this period, and it will be interesting to see how he will start at in Diegem, and how that will affect the classification in a way, because if he has an off day there, then that's not going to help his chances. Van der Haar was today, I expected him, to be honest, to be able to finish ahead of Van der Putten, but after a somewhat decent start and being able to be at the front and lead the pack at the moment, kind of faded in a way, and eventually even finished behind Van der Putten, losing out on a point. So it's difficult to say. I would fancy at the moment still Van der Putten for the Superprestige classification. I think that he normally should be able to do the job, because I feel that Van der Haar just at the moment, it's not really there. He tries really hard, but it's just at the moment it feels like it's just not really there. And I don't know if that is going to change over the course of this season. It could, but it feels like that it's just not really there at the moment. So we have to wait and see. It's Superprestige is always fun because it's a point difference between each place that you finish at, and that makes it just a very interesting classification. So Diegem is definitely going to tell us a little bit more, but after that, it's still game on for both Van der Putten, Van der Haar, and Van Toerenhout.
Yeah, it will certainly be close. I also fancy Van der Putten over Van der Haar. Today, I think the fatigue played a role for Van der Putten. He definitely didn't look as sharp, but he managed to repack himself in the second half of the race. Again, he put in a phenomenal effort in Hulst, and then also needed to dig deep yesterday. And yes, everyone in a way had to dig deep 3 days in a row, and that's absolutely valid. But for Van der Putten to be off the front for so long, that's a different type of effort than if you can stick in the wheels a bit and follow a bit. So definitely interesting. They can rest for 2 days now before they hit Gavre. After that, it's Loenhout, then a rest day, and then Besançon, and then it's time for the new year. I think a final note I want to make here is about the 80% rule. So there were a lot of starters today, and nearly 80 riders. There were, I think, even more registered, but there's always a lot of no-shows. For instance, Toon Aerts didn't start today, he was sick. And you saw that Van der Poel was just pulling through pelotons of lapped riders, and it's always at this time of the season, right? So because there's so many races here, because the cyclocross seasons everywhere else in the world have drawn to a close, you end with a situation like this, in which everybody comes to Belgium. Every house that is group accommodation in Belgium is booked. All the hotels near the races are booked because there's tons of people coming and tons of people staying there from every part of the world. From the UK, from the US, from Australia, from New Zealand, they're all here. And while that's beautiful, the 80% rule is also inherently broken because it's a linear curve. In the first laps, if you lose, let's say, 50% in the first lap, you're going to be lapped in the second lap. If you lose 30% per lap, it means that you escape the time cut in the second lap, but you're definitely going to be lapped in the third lap. If you lose 25% per lap, you're also going to be surviving the third lap because you'll just be before the 80%, but then in the next lap, you'll easily be lapped. And while it didn't seem to cause too many issues here, there can definitely be moments that it causes issues, like in the women's race. And we'll talk about it a bit more, but there one of the lapped riders was looking behind and she was passed at an unfortunate moment of single track with loose sand next to it. To get out of the way of Brandt, she needed to go into the loose sand but nearly lost control, taking out Brandt. And in other instances, we have seen the 80% rule affect race results. I recall Baal a couple of seasons ago. So it's a reoccurring issue and it's not something new, so I would urge the UCI to take matters into their own hands and alternate this rule. And yes, that means that these riders who I admire for coming over here will get taken out earlier, but I also don't really think that's an issue because if you're back there, it's also an elite athleticism event, right? It's elite athletics, and yes, it's cool for these riders that they can just register and race here, but ultimately it's about the top performers here, and that cannot be compromised by the back markers. And it's the same in Formula 1. The blue flags come out and it ruins their fights and it ruins whatever, but it's just the way it is. Then, with that rant over, let's go to the women's race. Here we had a leading group of three. Inge van der Heijden had the fastest start. She was joined up front by Lucinda Brandt and Sendo Carmen Alvarado. About halfway through the race, Alvarado placed an attack. Brandt was the only one to follow. The decisive moment came just after the halfway point in the race. They were lapping a rider. The rider that looked behind, first saw Alvarado coming, then looked again, saw Brandt coming, tried to move off the single path, nearly took out Brandt. That didn't really cause anything, but the pressure was on Brandt, and then as she went into the sand by pit 2, she didn't manage to unclip, whether that be a lack of concentration due to that incident with the lapped rider, or if it was just too much sand in her pedals and that she couldn't get out. That remains to be seen, but that was a decisive moment because Alvarado got a 10-second gap to that and was never seen again. Brandt finished second and Van der Heijden third. So Issam, what do you think? Was it a lack of concentration? Was it just the pedals being all clogged with sand and some mud at that point in the race?
Maybe. I think I recall somewhere that she was talking about having issues with her pedals. But, I think that might have been just a concentration thing. Being put on the pressure at that moment, really realizing that there is a crucial section coming ahead with the running. I think that there she just maybe panicked a little bit and wanted to make sure that she was not going to lose that much ground on Alvarado, and I think that maybe caused a mistake. But I think the decisive moment was that there was today some sand sections on the course, because I think sand was not really the friend of Brandt today. It was at times not great, and I think that definitely played a role. Although the others at times didn't really capitalize on Brandt's skills in the sand, I think that in the end that played a role. And when you're not that comfortable with the sand sections, it's just you spend so much energy in between, and then it becomes it adds up time after time, and that is just effort that you kind of lose out in the end, and that your effort that you would love to have in the end, it's just not really there, because your energy is just not really on the level that you need to be able to put the effort in and to have a very fast last lap. So I think that in the end Alvarado seized the opportunity, saw the moment, and put her on the pressure. I was afraid that was maybe a little bit too early, and I think that Alvarado maybe also had a moment that she thought, oh, Brandt is maybe coming back. But I think that she did a good job, put Brandt on the pressure the way it should have been, and won the race in the end. And I think that is, for a big part, that has to do with how comfortable she was in the sand compared to Brandt.
I think what played a role here, maybe the biggest role apart from that crash, with Brandt indeed saying it was her pedal. I mean, I don't think she would blame a lap rider even if it did influence her, but Brandt has had some issues with pedals before this season. It seems like her pedals clog up more often than those of other riders. Yesterday in Zonhoven, at some point, I recall seeing her on the big screen as well, aggressively stamping on her pedals, trying to clip in, whereas Petersen or Alvarado coming from behind at that point was just steaming up. Overall, Alvarado made less mistakes in the sand. She rode better through it up the sand dune. Like what you mentioned, the moment that Brandt might be looking to come back, her comeback, and if you want to call it like that, was completely halted when she missed the remount in the downhill of the sand dune. So I think overall, from the three leaders, Van der Heijden didn't have the power to compete, but when she was up there, Brandt certainly had the worst sand skills out of those riders, and that really hurt her a bit today. She made a few too many mistakes. It wasn't fast and smooth enough through the sand. And ultimately, Alvarado deserved the win with another smooth and consistent ride. You did definitely see that in the first part of the race, they were conserving energy. They were fine with Van der Heijden setting the pace. Van der Heijden was fine with securing a podium. Then in the second half of the race, they dropped the lap times a bit, but they don't want to dig too deep, right? Because there's a lot of racing to come, especially Brandt, who's going for every single classification, will have a hard time. So let's see what comes from it. I think Van der Heijden, as said, Issam, she can be happy with third. It was absolutely the maximum achievable for her. And she also benefits from the fact that a lot of riders weren't here today on the women's side.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, as you said, the sand wasn't really the biggest issue for Van der Heijden, but it was just, again, what we talked about yesterday. It goes somewhat well, and then at a certain point, somewhere mid-race, we cannot really pinpoint what that moment will be, but then at a certain point, it just kind of fades, and she's not really able to maintain the pace, or at least be within the same group that she was. And I think that just kind of happened again as well. It was just, she was up there, and then you just really see that she's kind of struggling behind, and at a certain point, it's just, it just snaps and the gap just opens up, and then at that point, it's just, becomes more and more difficult to get back to the two women in front. And I think in the end, as you say, we are missing quite some riders, but it would have still been, I feel, a reasonable results, maybe a top 5 or something in between there. I think that it would have still been a good result. So I think third was the maximum achievable, and there was not really much she could do about it. It was, in the end, it all came, everything fell in this place, and Van der Heijden was third. So,
and it's a good weekend for her. 5th in Hulst, 4th in Zonhoven, and 3rd in Mol. So, yes, a couple of riders weren't there, but arguably she would have finished ahead of most of them. So, as said yesterday, Vorst wasn't here, 2 broken bones in her hand. Casasola is still out with an infection. And then there were just a lot of riders that didn't come to the race today, because why would they? Backstedt, Schreiber, Vash, they're all in on the World Cup. So if we look at the rest of the top 10, we see some names we haven't really mentioned this season a lot. Behind the Dutch podium of Alvarado, Brandt and Van der Heijden, Sanne Kant finished 4th ahead of Julie Brouwers. 6th place went to Aniek van Alphen ahead of Lauren Molengraaf. 8th place went to Rebecca Garibaldi. Good to see her in the top 10 here. It's a name I've mentioned a lot when running down the results. 9th place went to Yara Kastelein, and 10th place went to Ella McLean-Howell. Let's start here with the Belgian duo. Kant continues what is a solid weekend for her. She was in the top 10 yesterday in Zonhoven, now in 4th place. But 5th place to Julie Brouwers, beating Aniek van Alphen and Lauren Molengraaf, is perhaps somewhat of a surprise, Issam. How do you view that? Because we do know that she is a very good sand rider, but this is still an overperformance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, Van Alphen has been struggling a little bit this season, especially the last couple of races. So in a way, obviously, it is definitely a surprise for Brouwers to be able to pull that off. At the moment, is not in the greatest of situations. And yeah, for Molengraaf, it was, I think it's her first race back after first race of the season, I think even. So it was a surprise to see her. She was on the start list, but I didn't expect her to start. But there she was, and it was interesting to see how she was racing, because it was, I would say, somewhat relaxed. And at a certain point, we didn't really get a lot of, broadcast time for her. I don't know what to make out of it. I think it was a quite normal race for someone that was out for such a long time and kind of now has to get back into rhythm, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting to see that she finally came back into the field and is racing again. And it's going to be interesting to see how she will progress throughout the season and what her goals are going to be within cyclocross, at least for this season, because I don't know exactly what the program will be, but yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. But I think for Brouwers, definitely the props for her that she was able to pull off, very, very good result. Of course, we are missing quite some riders, but nevertheless, you still have to make use of that, and she did that beautifully.
Yeah, so about Molengraaf, I would like to say more about it, but I can't because we don't know the reason why she's been out. There's been no communication, no response to people asking those questions, but clearly something was up. And it took long for her to return to competition. So I'll just say it's a fine result. Obviously, a rider like Molengraaf, you would hope that she could potentially finish fourth in a race like this. But again, she's been out. There's been a reason for it, and it has surely impacted her preparation because she was supposed to start her season before the European Championships. So that's it for Molengraaf. Final point I would like to make is that you see in the back end of the top 10 a lot of riders that, well, they are road riders and they do it for the love of cross, right? They're here because they have a passion in some. So, yeah, Kastelein is here. She's, of course, developed as a cyclocross rider and then switched to the road, which was really the right decision for her because in the cross, she was being passed by more talented riders, more technically gifted riders, and on the road, she could really utilize her power. On the road, her results have also kind of been stagnating, but she's still a fine rider, and she's won a stage in the Tour de France Femmes, so it definitely worked out for her that way. And if you see like around it, more riders for passion, right? So Marta Truijer finishes 14th. She's in a similar situation like Kastelein, also on the same team. Also, Ella McLean-Howell, she finished on the podium of U23 Mountain Bike World Championships this year. She was quite talented and is still quite talented. I mean, was quite talented in cyclocross. As a junior, she finished fourth at the World Championships in Fayetteville. As a first-year U23, I recall her just missing the top 15 at the Hogerheide World Championships. Who else was in that region? Sophie von Berstvorst, she races for Visma. She's a mountain bike rider. Anne Kleinenberg, she is also developed into a solid road rider. Letitia Borghesi, who is racing for EF. And also on the men's side, we saw, for instance, Jenno Bergmoes do this race. He also raced in Spain. He races for Lotto Destiny, and I personally think that that's always quite nice to see around the Christmas period, to see all these riders just race out of passion, these powerful road riders returning to the cross.
Yeah, that's always a pleasure, to have, and I think that it is a tradition that over the years has somewhat, it is now maybe a little bit more highlighted because we have quite some riders now that are doing quite well at the top of their games, being both good on the road and in cyclocross, and maybe that also ignited a little bit the passion of some that have done it in the past or were very good at it, but later on choose to go on the road. And I think it's a great sight to have. I mean, I saw as well they were talking about it with, I think it was Soudal Quickstep, the beach race that they were doing, the national championships, Belgian national championships, and they were talking as well that they have, of course, kind of now they're in a period where they don't go on training camp, but they can go to Spain and train alone or train in Belgium, but you can also put yourself in these type of disciplines, the beach race or cyclocross, and I think that is just great to see, and that is also part of it. And as you say, it's all these riders have now the opportunity to do so, and I think we welcome them with open arms.
Certainly, and we'll see more of them in action the coming days. Issam, I think that will conclude this episode of the Cyclocross Social podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
We will be back on Boxing Day covering the racing in Gavere. Thanks everyone for listening. Catch you guys then. Goodbye.